I'd like to introduce Rina Alexin of Productside. As I mentioned before the recording started, she'll be talking to us this evening about her product management skills benchmark report and what that means from a career insight perspective. The report is backed up from data collected from thousands of product managers. And so this is a good way to observe overall trends in the product management space from a data-driven perspective. And so with that, I will stop sharing and turn over to Rita.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, SVPMA, for hosting me today. I'm excited to talk to you all, as Tom already said, about our Global Skills Benchmark Report. Okay, so my name is Rina Alexin. I'm the CEO of Productside. For those of you who are not familiar with Productside, you may be more familiar with our previous name. We were formerly known as the 280 Group, and we had offices right by Highway 280 in Los Gatos. And really, like I was telling the group here earlier, had some fond memories of myself coming to some of the P camps, but I also know that the company has had a pretty close relationship with SVPMA with our founder, Brian Lawley. So thanks so much for having me today. At Productside, we are an outcome-driven product partner. And I know it's true for me, but it's also true for a lot of my team that we really do obsess with not just providing high-quality training content, but also caring about what is the impact, what is the result. And that's actually what led us to create a lot of the assessments that we put into practice, including the skills assessment that I'll be sharing with you today. Without having a really good understanding of where people are and then where they go, it's really hard for us to call ourselves an outcome-driven partner. And so we, I think, have been running this now for over 6 years, definitely since I've started having this kind of assessment. So I like to invite you all to engage. This is a small group. This presentation is more for you than it is for me. And we're not going to be running the typical polls. So instead, I'd like for you to enter into chat, maybe if you're willing to share your title, where you work, just so that we can get to know each other. Throughout this presentation, if you'd like to ask a question, I invite you to raise your hand. I'll be able to see you, and you can actually ask it live. You can also put it into chat. I'm happy to do it either way. And there will be time for Q&A at the end. But I like to, like I said, I can talk for hours about just about any topic, especially on product management, but it's much more entertaining for me if we talk together. So if you can open up chat and just share your background. Does everybody have chat engaged? That's actually something that, oh, there it is. Okay. Great, we have a founder. This also helps me understand how to make the points a bit more relevant for the group. Okay, we have senior product managers. Fantastic. Okay, feel free to continue to put in your titles. For the agenda today, I'll be going over first the introduction and methodology, then we'll cover some of the results and key findings, and then I think the meat of the presentation really will be about the insights that we can glean from this assessment. I love that I love talking at SVPMA, like Silicon Valley. You guys have a lot of founders and entrepreneurial spirit. I totally respect that. Wonderful. Okay, so as mentioned, we have had, I think at this point, well over 6,000 people respond to this assessment. It gives us a unique view into a large group of people who call themselves product managers, who do the hard work of product management. And Liz, if you can you post in the chat the link to the skills assessment? So if you haven't taken it, you have, great, thank you for contributing. If you haven't taken it, it's a free skills assessment, and it covers all the 15 skill areas that we have identified for product management, and it's a pretty robust assessment. And as I said earlier, we really do obsess with understanding where people are and what the gaps are. And in this report, I won't be covering it, but if you download the full report, you'll get even an inside view into industry-specific data. So that's the cool part, is really understanding, are there gaps or differences even among different similar titles and then different industries. Now, I do want to call this out up front. This is a self-assessment. That means if you take it yourself, you're going to be grading yourself on your ability and your confidence in your abilities. So that means that there could be a little bit of bias. I will tell you from experience of delivering these assessments for our clients, there are occasionally some clients where instead of seeing the typical pattern of skill areas increasing, we find that after training engagement, very rarely, they can decrease. And that has little to do with whether or not we've been successful at our job of providing high quality training content, and more that the people who had assessed themselves were kind of a little surprised about how much they didn't know about a certain area. So we do focus a lot on how do we make this assessment as good as possible while it being a self-assessment. And so we provide a rating scale. I actually think we're going to be even improving on this rating scale, but this helps at least people to really question, can you teach whatever that question asks you to other people effectively? That is world-class, right? I think all of us have known, once you're able to teach a concept to someone else, it almost like feels like you really are the expert in the room. And so we try to do, again, whatever we can to remove the bias from this rating scale. In terms of who responds, this is also kind of important to know, and I don't think this is going to blow you away, but a good percentage, about 3/4, are from individual contributors. That is the majority of product management professionals out there. But this does mean that about a quarter are director, VP, and above, so managers of product management. And that gives us a good insight in terms of, at different levels of seniority and different levels of experience, what changes are there in that population? And by looking at the changes based on those populations, we can then posit how to become a better product manager throughout the career. That's the basis of this report. Any questions so far? I think this is pretty self-explanatory. Okay. So here's another question, and I guess this is a write-in because we're not doing a poll, but if you could choose only one, which skill would you focus on improving in the next year? And if you have someone that's have a skill that's maybe not listed here, feel free to write it in. I will share with the group that we recently ran a different survey where we questioned, what we did was we wanted to find out, again, being kind of obsessed with what are the outcomes from our engagements, we ran a survey on certification outcomes. So we provide certifications through AIPMM, and we want to know what are the outcomes of those who become essentially who are trained professionals. And there was a marked difference in how people responded to this kind of question. For those who did not have any kind of training or certification, most of them responded with business fundamental skills, product management fundamentals, essentially kind of everything from how to do road mapping, or as is out here, competitive analysis. Whereas those who did go through training responded similar to the group here, AI and leadership and strategy skills. AI strategy. Okay, that one's a good one. That one's coming up more and more frequently for us as well. So what were the results and key findings? What were people actually good at? This, I think, has been true since the beginning. So what this here says is essentially when you take the average, and this is the part of people doing this as a self-assessment, the average overall skill areas, product managers rated themselves around 6.36. So the highest rated skill, which was 13.2% higher than that, is domain knowledge. And this is time and time again, we are seeing people feel pretty confident about domain knowledge. And that always, it surprises me and yet it doesn't, because when I talk to hiring managers all the time, they care about domain knowledge, but at the same time, domain knowledge is the one skill area that I think can be much more easily learned. It is something that everybody will get better at over time in their domain. It's the other skills that I think are harder. And here are some of the weakest skills. Any surprises here? For me, not so much. Again, these are time and time again rated as some of the weakest skills. I do think end of life is partially rated as a weak of skill. Oh, you're surprised I put it. Well, I'll get there. End of life, because one, I'm seeing, and it could just be, okay, so I have to point this out. At Productside, I do see an intersection of companies who don't quite have product management right yet, right? Or they wouldn't be coming to me. And so a lot of the companies that we work with have trouble with end of life because they don't do it. That's actually a big problem of large companies where they hold on to essentially zombie products. Yes, exactly. But they're Troy, they're kind of almost worse than what I think Warren Buffett once called like cigar butt industries, where it's like you're taking the puffs of the cigar and you want to milk it to the end of life. I think it's worse than that. It's the inability to let go of some revenue because they are not understanding the opportunity cost. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to let go. Competitive analysis does not surprise me. I agree that this should be stronger. And yet time and time again, I'm going to ask the group here, how often do you do it? How often are you expecting your team to continuously update the knowledge about competitors? I think that's what's causing. That's amazing, Jen. That is not the global average. You are above the global average. A lot of companies do not update their competitive analysis more than once a year, similar to pricing. I think that's what really leads to some of these being the weaker skills. But I love it. You're supposed to be looking I don't know, every week maybe. I would love it if they move from once a year to at least once a quarter, but you know, girl can dream. Okay, insights for product leaders. So I mentioned at the beginning that what we like to do with this report is we're gathering data to just understand what are some patterns that exist. So when we look at new product managers versus senior product managers, I mean, obviously there's no surprise that senior product managers are higher skilled. They have done the work much more and they're expected to do a lot more of certain work. It's these three that have the highest jumps: end of life, product management process, and marketing and launch. And I can also say from, qualitative my experience, when somebody is hired for a more senior role, they are hired in to do a specific job. Like they have their own jobs to be done. A senior role sometimes is brought into a company that is struggling with end of life, and they're brought in for their experience for managing that kind of portfolio and rationalizing the portfolio. Also, and you'll see in later slides, product management process. And again, I have to explain, you're in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is not like the rest of the world. Silicon Valley is where a lot of product management principles come from. That's why our company was established there, and that's why we're so proud of having our roots there. But a lot of companies really struggle with having a product management process. It's interesting, if I reflect on it, a lot of founder-led companies don't always have a product management process because the founder is the one really engaging with the market, getting all that market data, but the founder is following their own process. They are doing it. It's whether or not that company can then, as it grows and scales, mature into a way where that's not an ad hoc process. But yeah, senior product managers do much better there. And then marketing launch is another aspect I see time and again, that the go-to-market is missed by a lot of companies. It's fascinating to me that it is, but it's true. I've been in conversations in companies where they say go-to-market is not, it's not their responsibility. And I just don't know how that exists. Like, what does it mean to have successful product without understanding marketing and launch? Too many products sit on the shelf when product managers are not empowered to own marketing and launch. So I do expect that senior product managers and senior PMs would have that kind of skill. Any questions here? Okay, so I'm going to move on. I'm going, hopefully as slow or fast as you need me to. Mid-career to experienced PM. This is another slice of data that we looked at. And the difference here is here in this middle group, end of life also, again, it just shows up, I think, a lot because it's really low as a scale area across the board. So it does show up as like, a pretty big swing. But forecasting, pricing, and again, competitive analysis. Part of that, again, is because these are some of the lower skill areas, but they do see a jump. I will say that when we take a look at director level, the other element is not just what jumps higher, and I don't have this outlined, but I guess I can annotate. Leadership, we separated, I think in future reports, we may bring those together, but we separated leadership and management meaning like how to manage someone, and lead meaning having the vision. But the leadership area, really important for senior. And then I mentioned PM process, marketing, and launch as well. But that one I will point is probably one of the higher areas outside of domain knowledge and customer understanding for senior people. All right, I want to read this. We can talk a little, I can share a little bit about the technical versus business PM. I see more of that dependent on what products they manage and the culture of the company as to which one might do better. That's a good one. Okay, so top, the highest respondents, so like the industry that most of the respondents, like the highest one, I believe, is software, followed by financial services and insurance. And then we also have a lot of people from like manufacturing and telecommunications. So it's covers a lot of different industries, but we do have a lot of tech in here, as well as more traditional industries. So I think it actually shows like a pretty broad cross-section. Okay, you're gonna have to help me, Liz. How do I remove the annotation? It's been a while since I used Zoom.
Sorry, I'm not seeing an annotation.
Oh,
Where are you
Oh, it's
seeing
still
that?
there.
It's there in the business
yeah.
code.
Yeah. If you just go to annotate, get the toolbar up there, and
It's not showing up. That's why. Oh, here it is.
Yeah. then either use eraser or
I got you.
or the
Thank you.
trash.
It wasn't. It was like showing up all the way, and I have a really big screen, so
Yeah.
showing up all the way.
Far
on the
left.
Thank you so much.
Way far left.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So here is something that I think is interesting. Director role. Now, okay, so I do want to admit, to make this a little bit maybe more impressive, we did the scale here does start at 5 again, because a lot of the skill areas are above 6. But I think, and this is by the way across the board, what we wanted to show here is what kinds of what do managers excel on, and what is the difference between somebody that has at least a formal training or like a process by which they follow versus a trained direct, like an untrained person. In terms of the path to director, again, leadership and domain knowledge and customer understanding, they're all very, very important. But When we look at the significant differences, a lot of it is, again, go-to-market, pricing, and strategy really comes clear here in terms of having a really strong director who really knows what they're doing, has strong skill areas. So when we look at a director role, what we can tell from this data is that marketing and launch, so really, I think this has to do with having a really good strategy, but also having go-to-market fit is going to be a way to set yourself up for that promotion to director. And if I think about it, if I am hiring a director level, that's really where I want them to be successful. I want my products obviously to have success in the market and to make money for the business as well as, and they do that through value add to the customer. But it does make sense why a director role would, be expected to have some of these skills that are much more strong. There's also an argument here for PM process. This one, it was not as clear, but I'll talk to you about PM process and why I care about it so much, and share kind of my experience here in a few slides as well. Skills to look for when hiring a product manager. So I'm going to caveat this. I personally, whenever I hire anybody for any role, I like to use it, and I think it's from The Who. I think it's The Who. It's the mission, like what, and I've heard this said also, like, what is the tour of duty for this person at our company? Like, what is the job to be done that I'm hiring them to do? So I like to start there and understand, for that job, what are the critical experience and skills that they need to bring to the table in order to do that job well. That means I'm selecting the right person and I'm setting them up for success to do their job. If you don't have that, what we try to do here is think, when we look at skill areas, which are the weaker skills? So if you're hiring a product manager, and let's say earlier in their career, these are some of the skills that show up as being on the weaker side. I'm not including end of life because sometimes that, again, I mentioned it earlier, that might be a more senior hire. But if you're then designing like a general product manager role, you may want to hire and look for or do tests around these areas. So writing requirements, business skills, marketing and launching products, product management process, and competitive analysis. Okay, I'll cover those questions at the Q&A. I like these questions. When you are looking, so this is candidates less than 10 years of experience. When you look at, I believe it's like more of the middle manager, the three ones that show up are competitive analysis, pricing, and forecasting. And I use forecasting almost like business case creation for more of that middle role. So that's what this data shows, is like those tend to be on the weaker side. And so maybe you want to test for someone, because if you're getting somebody who's good at those weaker skills, they're probably better in some of the other ones as well. Okay, let me actually answer that. Do you feel people understand what strategy means? No. Oh my God. Okay, so this was a couple weeks ago now, but I had someone who I think is really smart, like genuinely very smart, show me their strategy, and it was a list of features. It was literally a list of features. It was a list of features with some kind of language that sounded like it could be visionary. Like, we will include AI in our product. That's not a strategy. I think strategy comes from having a really good understanding of how the business makes money and the market. And then you carve out what you're positioning. Like, your strategy, I think, is really, really related to how you position, like what is your right to win? And then how do you take that and leverage it across your products? So I don't think people think strategically. I think it is a skill area that we see that needs to be developed. There's a lot of really good, like, if you can't start, I will say this. If you are one of the people that it's like, okay, I'm not doing this super well, you're not alone. And a lot of companies are missing the strategic link. Like they'll have these high-level objectives for the company. A lot of them are like grow revenue. Like we're going to grow revenue. That's their objective for the company. And then they have these list of features that their product teams are working on, and they're missing the middle link of like, why these features to grow this revenue. So if you struggle with this, I will say a couple things. One is we literally at Productside, check it out. We have 3 webinars that we just did. Watch them in order, how to help your annual product planning process. The very first one is all about like strategy, product strategy. And it talks about product growth strategy specifically, because that's what a lot of product managers, I think, are being asked to do, is grow the business. So we talk about product growth strategy, literally thinking about what markets, what channels, how does how do what we build help us achieve that, and all of that. So I hope I answered that question. Teresa, do you have a point here? Okay. And then regarding presentation skills, I think in the interview process, very frequently there is some presentation, or I mean, there really should be some either case study or some way in which you're asking the candidate to present. I agree that presentation skills, we probably bundle it under communication skills, but I will agree that, you could argue that's a very specific skill area. I do see a lot of interviewers do test that, and I think it's really smart to do so. Yeah. Okay. I like the point from Jim, and yeah, I agree. It's like, how does the business make money, and what does the market need, and figuring out like to carve your niche there. Okay. So I do want to, I am proud of what we do. And I did want to point this out, that training improves skills. We see it time and time again because we do a lot of pre and post skill assessments. And in this survey as well, because if we found out it didn't, like, I would want to change what we do, because I would not want to be sitting in a seat which provides training as well as advisory services without an impact. We did have, for example, here, a Big 4 consulting firm that we did pre and post for, and it was, okay, think about it this way, a Big 4 consulting firm, they tend to be very project management focused, so lacking product mindset. They've scored pretty low across the board on skill areas. That's how we got some individual skill improvements as high as 65%, because we showed them how to actually think like a product manager and do the work. But it's pretty important, and yet still we find that about more than half, and I would say probably even fewer than this, because again, the group or our sample size can be a little biased towards people who have done training, since they are in our audience already. So there's very little true formal product management training. But I will say it's not just about training. So here's the other question I have. I kind of brought it up because I want to talk a little bit about process. I know process sounds like a boring word. Documentation, that's another one. But this is almost like the vitamins you need to take, because if you don't do it, well, we'll talk about that. But how about the group here? What do you think your process is? Do you feel like you have process in place, and it's embraced, and the organization knows, like, if you deliver a roadmap or have a very specific meeting, it's pretty similar. People expect a certain level of information and they get it? Or are you in the situation where a salesperson can talk to different people and have very different answers? Yes. Mostly 2. Interesting. Actually, across the board right now, Hitesh, last 2 years, huge swing on focus on delivery. It's because budgets got cut, and when it's so hard to defend the value of discovery work. And unfortunately, what that means is I do think that a lot of roadmaps in the last 2 years, delivered things, but a lot of it is sitting on shelves because I think I wrote a post on it literally today on LinkedIn. I've seen so many roadmaps littered with executive feature requests that were like obvious solutions to the market, and they're not obvious. All right. So why do I care about process? And again, I think it's even less than this. About 2/3 don't have a true product management process. And think about it this way, I like how it's written here on the slide. What if 60% of development teams didn't follow a process to develop the product on the execution phase? So how are companies able to be true learning organizations themselves if they don't follow some consistency, some understanding of this is the way in which we work, this is the way in which we make decisions, and it's consistent every time. There's essentially a playbook that a product manager can follow. And this really slows down, and it slows down in a lot of, I think, unique ways that people don't necessarily think about, which is when a person leaves a company. When a person leaves a company, it becomes really hard to onboard somebody else. And okay, Ali brings up the point around process needs to be tailored. Yeah, okay, there's a spectrum of what process is. I'm not talking about procedure. So I think a lot of times when we say process, people get confused with the word procedure. And a procedure is step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Step 4A, right? Like following. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking more high level of how you make decisions, that you use personas, and there's a specific way in which you use personas. And your product roadmap is driven by what the personas are going to accomplish, right? Like it's basically the principles, the first principles on which your product management practice is run. I'm not talking procedure. I am talking how you make decisions and what information is required to be able to know that's a high quality decision. That's the best way I could tell it or explain it. That's why at Productside we call it a playbook. Now, here's the thing, and I'm going to share this data here. The benefits of product management process. Have no process is the blue, the bright blue is an ad hoc process, and the gold is a have process. And yeah, there's a scale. It starts at 4. It's not 5, but it's still there. But every single one of these lines shows the same. And it's that the more, I would say, more mature product managers follow process, not procedure. When we look at data and we combine, so training across the board increases the gap between the trained and versus untrained is between 14 and 25%. Process is about similar. So combined, we saw certain skill areas are between 20 and 30% higher. So for people who have, essentially think of it this way, they know what they're supposed to do, when they're supposed to do it, who's supposed to do it, and then they know how to do it. And that's what actually increases skills, is having a consistent way of understanding what your job is. I mean, so many people, like I think 10 out of 10, again, I have a biased sample, but 10 out of 10 companies we work with, when we interview product managers, there's issues around role clarity because they don't know what exactly their job is. And I've heard it over and over again as well. The job or the role of a product manager isn't defined. And if the job isn't defined, then the lack of process means that a lot of product managers are then expected to do work that probably isn't the most valuable work for a product manager to do. And instead, they end up doing work that other teams need them to do. So that's what ends up happening a lot of the times, is product managers being subject matter experts, working support tickets, sales calls, and not necessarily working on what is the vision, where are we going, and what is the strategy. So I care a lot about process because if we can define what the role of a product manager is, then we do the why, the when, the how, the who, and then we teach, well, I guess the who, and then we teach them how to do it really well. That's where transformation actually happens. Like that's where we see the biggest results for our companies. So that's why I obsess about this data, because at the end, what I want is companies that have really strong product managers who are empowered to do the great product management work, balancing, delivery is really important. I don't want to come off this call with you thinking that I don't think delivery is important. Over the last 2 years, I just think there's been a really big shift to emphasizing delivery against at the cost of doing true research and discovery practices and validation and experimentation. So those practices, I think, are now less mature by some by teams than the delivery. And when I see products that are worked on for multiple years with no adoption out in market, that breaks my heart, because it's not just that a company made a bad investment and a bad decision. It's whole teams, like think about it. Yes, I mean execution, delivery of the thing that you said you were going to build. But think about it, it's whole teams and their careers. Like we've at Productside, we're not immune to, like, I know we teach product management, but we're not immune to having mistakes or, making a wrong call or thinking something was validated and then realizing we probably had a little bit more confirmation bias. That's okay, because we iterate and improve. Like, it's not going to be perfect the first time we get it out. That's not the goal. But if I were to work 2 years on something and have it launch in market and die, that's just depressing for my career. So we want to avoid that. And that's why we care so much about process, because we see that if we build training on process, that's why Productside is so different. It's like we start with can we define, at least at a high level, what product management is expected to do. Define that first, then you build content, because training is part of change management. Like, it's really just a way to communicate expectations. If you combine those two things, that's your best chance at closing skill gaps. So if you're interested in more, this is a QR. You can I know we're going to share the report as well. So if you don't want to look at the QR code right now, this is a way to download the Productside benchmark report. It covers more data. It has a few more, obviously more insights. I shared some of them with you today, but there are more insights here. The 4th edition is going to come out mid next year. We're going to do it a little, I think we're planning, guess I shouldn't say it, but we're planning to do it a little even differently, where we're going to layer in the Productside blueprint on top of the skill areas. But if you're also interested in assessing your team, this is something new that we started this year, which is essentially a PM process assessment. It's really the team assessment. It's about 35 odd questions, which we give to all of our clients, but any product leader can take it. And it provides a view into maturity across the different product management practices. So we do it based on our Productside blueprint, which if you're not familiar with, you can also download that from our website. But it essentially covers the areas that we think are important for product management, the context in which product managers operate. So that includes the market, the internal context, and the users, so the users and customers. So we ask questions about the maturity of the context of the organization. Tell you this is where we get the lowest scores. Discovery practices of investigating problems, defining solutions, creating the problem, and then delivering the solution. And delivery, it's execution, but it's also launch and measurement of product success. So there's a lot of data and metrics, I think, in the deliver portion of product management versus just releasing something out into market. All right. So that was the presentation. I'm open for questions. I try to answer some of these, but I know there was a few more that I missed, so I'm going to kind of go back and first cover those. And if you have more, just put them in chat. Okay. So there's a big difference. So this is from Ali. Big difference between B2B versus B2C, as well as in terms of PM experience. And if you add, I don't know what I think it's hardware. Then there's hardware.
Right. Like forecasting. I remember I started my career in hardware before moving to software, and a lot of my time was on forecasting, what to build. And a lot of these software product managers never done forecasting. Margin. We do a lot of time spending time on margin analysis. Some of these new product managers have no idea how to do margins or forecast things that are related to hardware.
Yes, Ali, you are right. Okay, so I'll address this. So you are absolutely right. I think majority of our respondents are going to be in B2B type companies. So rather than retail, there are differences with manufacturing. In fact, when we do skills assessments for manufacturing, we often customize. So when we work directly with clients, we try to leave as much of the assessment intact as possible so that we can provide the benchmark report or analysis against the benchmark, but we do customize questions. A lot of the forecasting questions in the future versions are going to be taken out because of exactly what you're talking about. We're seeing more and more product managers not really be required to do forecasting, and P&L and forecasting being much more as you're saying, hardware or traditional type companies. Even those companies, though, I will say what I'm seeing is a lot of them are trying to be more digital first. So they are also hiring software companies. So it becomes really hard from an industry perspective to know, like, are you working on the hardware piece or the software value added data piece? So it just doesn't muddle, our data's it's going to be muddled more and more. So it doesn't provide as much value. Yeah, that's a good point. I will say most problems, more problematic companies are in the B2B space versus B2C. Part of that has to do with just understanding the market. A lot of B2B, we've been in situations where there isn't a buyer persona for a B2B company, and they're trying to really focus on the users without understanding the buyers also is a really critical persona, especially when we're talking about really, really large contracts. So there's definitely a lot of more challenges in B2B, selling B2B, and then also having the impact of fewer customers on your roadmap. So most of the bigger challenges with sales and product happen with the B2B organizations as well. Okay. Liz, did I miss any others?
Not that I can see.
There's one at the end.
Jill?
From SecCut?
If we break this data by tech versus non-tech companies, do these issues become more relevant? Jill, do you remember which issues? I talked about a lot of issues.
Oh, I think this was during your discussion around having processes and structure and around product management itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, since I will say, let me just explain. So 22.2% of this data set are software. So they're about 1/5 of the set. The next highest is finance, and the next is manufacturing, followed by healthcare. And then internet apps, it's its own, it's 6. So it's it's over a quarter are software tech companies, actually. I don't recall off the top of my head what the unique challenges are by the tech versus non-tech companies. I will say that there's a difference. I think the difference actually occurs not if you're working on a tech product, but if you are working at a company that I would consider digitally native versus a more older company that is not digitally native, but working on a tech product now. So companies that grew up are older and so grew up in more of a different kind of like a sales-led motion, but built technology versus a product-led motion, have more challenges than those that are digitally native companies. Does that answer?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then, yeah, I think to your point, if some other things I've heard is product management at maybe at a bank, an older bank versus a new fintech company is going to look a lot different as well. So yeah, like
Yes.
while both are digital, it's kind of like one was operating in a different prior environment than the current one.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so that is the advantage of new companies, is that they are not, I guess, bogged down by old culture and old mindset. And it's really hard to change culture. I would say that's what we work hardest to do, is try to change the culture of an organization. That's why we work a lot of times with C-suite, if we can. That's how we help the most. To Teresa.
Yeah, you talked in various ways about the role of the product manager, but in as a way to recap it or summarize it, how would you articulate the overall role of the product manager as it should be versus how it mostly is in companies?
I think the product manager should be empowered to make decisions about what the future of the company is going to look like. I think if I can boil it down to one sentence, that would be it. And that's a hard thing to do. It's not easy to do, but it's really understanding where the company is going to go, not this year, but next year and over the next 3 years, if you can. I know companies change, but have like an idea or point of view. And at the end, the role of the product manager is so core to the company because everybody else in the company has to live with those decisions. Sales has to sell it, marketing has to market it, support has to support it. This is the most crucial, most strategic role in any business. What it is, a lot of times, is instead of being the light that everybody else is like collaborating with and showing and kind of building the future with, it ends up being a, can I call it like the old-fashioned, like the complaint box for the company, where people are kind of putting in requests around things that are broken and asking for a fix. I think sometimes that's the issue, that a lot of product managers feel like they're bogged down because they're getting all of these stakeholders that they feel truly responsible for. And they're kind of dealing with a lot of requests, and it's a lot of overwhelm sometimes around really knowing what to do, what's the right thing to do, what's the next right thing to do. I think that's why a lot of times right now, what we really try to do is help them in understanding outcomes are not new. We talk about outcomes right now, but they're not new. We've had objectives, we had OKRs, we've had other things of ways of talking about it, but it does help people to really start with outcomes. Like, what are you trying to accomplish for the business? And what are you trying to get your persona to do better? If you can articulate whatever your persona is, like we have like Dina is a director of product. Dina will be able to do this better. Dina will be able to go back and measure the results of her team's performance. Like, that's our goal. So if we can start articulating in like those objectives, that reduces the overwhelm from internal requests, because then okay, my job is to work on Dina's problem and not necessarily be, the fixer-upper of everything else. It helps people. Anybody have a different point of view? I'm always curious. Okay. I have a question here on a couple of years back. There used to be inbound and outbound PM roles. Do I see this? Okay, let's define this, because I once defined this wrong. Actually, I know I didn't define it wrong. I actually had 2 different definitions. I know one of them is more correct. I actually had in Israel, somebody I know once called inbound PM, the product owner, and the outbound PM, the product manager, meaning they were outbound, they were focused on the market, versus inbound was focused on engineering. But that's actually not the right way. But that's why I want to define it. So inbound PM is actually the product manager, like they are, an outbound PM is almost like the product marketing manager. So yeah, so I think that I know Airbnb caused a lot of, give me one second, the Airbnb stuff where you all know what I'm talking about, where he's like, there's no need for product management, just do product marketing or something, caused a lot of issues, I'll call it that. There are still product management and product marketing roles at organizations. Oftentimes, I wish there were more product marketing roles because a lot of companies really struggle with the go-to-market, and they struggle with it because, again, it's a big, big job to make decisions about the future of your company. It's a big job. So having someone there who's with you on that journey and also helping do the growth strategy, and enabling sales teams and making sure that there's actually a plan and there's success once you do all the hard work with development teams on building or your builders of the product. So yeah, there are still those roles. I don't always see them in startups. I would say I probably see product marketing roles more in more mature companies. And then where the product marketing role sits is another question. Sometimes they sit within marketing, sometimes they sit within product, but it's very different across companies. I see Jim nodding a lot, so
Oh, yeah.
he knows.
SciCat had another one there with looking for your definition of delivery and asking it, did that mean execution?
Yes. Yeah, I did respond to that right away. Yeah, I mean execution of the product. So actually development and delivery, but delivery to me again means from a product management standpoint, it means not just build, like we have a product side we call create, the one where you develop. Deliver is the launch of the product or launch of the features out into the market, and then the measurement of its success. So that's what it's like you shipped, and then what happens once you ship. And yes, Brian Chesky, that was gonna bother me. Thank you, Joel. I was referring to Brian Chesky's infamous talk where he essentially tried to implode the meaning of product management and product marketing. Go look it up. I'm not gonna call it back. It's given too many flashbacks already. All right. Any other questions? This was fun for me. I hope it was informative for you. And again, I do encourage you, if you want to participate, take the skills assessment. We're going to be doing, we do this every year. We're going to launch another one with different insights. If you have questions about, how to cut data, I'll take those too. You guys can find me. I think easiest place to reach me is on LinkedIn, Rina Alexin. I think I'm the only Rina Alexin on LinkedIn. But feel free to reach out. I would love to connect with all of you. And yeah, if you have any questions for me directly, I'm pretty responsive.
Rina, I do have one last question.
Go ahead.
And also I want to make sure everybody hangs on after you finish talking,
Yes,
so we can
that's
do
right.
some networking. Oh God, now I have to get it back again. This is a self-assessment. What
Yes.
is your sense of how the responses would be different if people were assessing others they work with?
So we do a number. Oh, thank you for doing that, Liz. That's so nice of you. Okay. Teresa, we do a number of different kinds of assessments when we work privately because, again, self-assessments are good, but, they are flawed. I was honest about that. You have to take a real honest look, and we do try to encourage people to do that when they do the self-assessment. I think other people, I've seen it both ways, so I think it just really depends on the person. Sometimes people rate others with more grace, and sometimes they're more critical. I think more often they are probably more nice about it if they know the other person will find out. So I think it all just depends. What we try to do with assessments is if we want a real picture, we do self-assessment, and then we do interviews, and then we actually look at work, actually work product does not lie. So that's how when we do an actual diagnostic, like a full team assessment, we do a pretty holistic approach to understanding skill areas and then process maturity.
Or what if they were going to assess other people more generically? Like, most product managers, rate here on strategy or rate here on
So yeah, I don't know how people
competitive analysis.
we've never done that. So what I can only say is what we have done is we've asked managers to tell us what they want their teams to rate at. So we have gotten that. And then, so that's one of the other ways in which we can cut data is we ask managers, so what's your expectation of your team across these skill areas? And I will tell you, they've never been right. Like, it's not been that, oh, yes, it's a 7 and it's a 7. And I will say, okay, I know the self-assessments can be problematic, but when we do them successfully, we do them with the champion, so the product leader, explaining that this assessment will not go into your personal file. This is for your personal development only. Rating yourself honestly is going to help us all get way better. And it's got nothing to do with you. Like, if you're a 2, say you're a 2. That's okay. That's good for us to know. We have had skills assessments where they come in like 3 or below once that message is clear. So I do know that it can be done. It just you have to prime, like you have to give the right context to people to feel psychologically safe to fill this out correctly.
It would be so interesting to ask. Oh, go ahead.
No, we do, from this data set, we do remove everybody that's rating themselves just 10s across the board and like 1s across the board, just so y'all know we don't include those responses. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be so interesting to have people rate themselves and then rate sort of generically their peers or people that they work with across, across their career, what have you. It would be interesting to compare that data and see how other people see other product management executives.
Like, what do you
as far
think
as their strengths and weaknesses
at your company? What do you think other people?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you're a 10, but they're a 5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that could be interesting. It's not really I don't think it's scientific from the perspective of like asking someone's opinion, because how that's why I'm trying to say we don't do it, because it's like, are they qualified to know? Versus that when we do it, I will say that like the experts at Productside, they've seen thousands of product managers. They've seen it all. So they can they can really assess someone's skills. Okay. Yes, please stay for networking. It's like 11 here. I'm on the East Coast, so I'm probably going to say good night and goodbye to you all.
We'll let you go. We'll let you go.
But this was so much fun, and I have to say a lot more fun than than I thought, in the sense of like, thank you for the questions, the engagement. I really appreciate it. And I'm really happy that I got invited. So thank you so much for the SVPMA board. They run a thankless job. So I'm going to say thank you to you all for doing this, because the PM community, they need these kinds of communities. So thank you for doing that. It's the good thankless work.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rina, for being here. And Tom, I don't know if, well, first of all, round of applause, everybody, for Rina. We can give a virtual round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and your insights and for sharing this. You guys do this for a living, and yet you were generous enough to share this with us, as a service and a gift to the community. So thank you so much.
Anytime. My best. Have a good night, everyone.
Take care.